Welcome to the talk, Designing Efficient Vacuum Pressure Swing Adsorption Processes for Air Separation, Applying an Oxygen Binding Adsorbent. I'm the presenting author, Hector Riviera, and I'm presenting this work in collaboration with Rialf, Gupta, Amato, Peters, and Carpenter. We are affiliated with the School of Chemical and Biomolecular Engineering at Georgia Tech and RTI International in North Carolina in the USA. So let's get started. First of all, let me introduce some background information on air separation. As most of you know, this is one of the most important gas separations in the industry nowadays. And this is accomplished by the different kinds of thermal separation processes, depending on the production scale at which either oxygen or nitrogen is required for the processes. So this can be done with the Linde process and using cryogenic distillation, which is actually very efficient from the thermal point of view. But on a smaller scales, as I've mentioned, intermediate scale and small scale applications, adsorbent-based separations are more efficient and also more economically attractive from the commercial point of view. And full order mathematical models that describe these type of adsorption-based processes are needed for detailed process analysis and design. So the goal of this work is to outline and assess a systematic design strategy which can be applied to develop adsorption-based separation processes, applying such kind of adsorbents. So what is so special about oxygen binding adsorbents? Well, as some of you in the audience may know, these commercial processes that have been applied to separate air components usually employ adsorbents for which the nitrogen species is the more adsorbed species. So categories of zeolite materials, different types of zeolites, mixed cation zeolites, lithium X zeolites have been the ones that have worked and have been commercialized successfully for this type of application. But it is also, from a process point of view, it is attractive to use oxygen binding adsorbents. And this has raised a lot of interest in the last 30 years or so approximately. Some of the earliest open literature works include those of Yang. And in this case, the materials are particular in the sense that they try to emulate the way that biological systems fix oxygen, and therefore the name oxygen binding. And from these cobalt complexes, so-called covalent materials are an example of this type of materials. Most important challenge for this type of materials in particular that bind the oxygen preferentially is the stability. So that's something that has been worked on and refined in the last 10, 15 years. And that's also one of the big challenges in implementing this type of materials for air separation. And some of the most recent works have been focusing in applying metal organic frameworks, very recent works actually from this year. Jeffrey Lang's group in Berkeley, for example, has looked at different types of metal organic frameworks that can realize high temperature oxygen adsorption. They have also looked at the cryogenic regime. So this is going on, and this has the potential, and like I said, from the process point of view, this could potentially benefit and allow us to, when oxygen binding materials are identified that are stable, that allow us to now develop processes with such kinds of materials for air separation. So let me comment now a little bit on the details of this presentation regarding the overall design strategy that we follow. And this is probably not unknown to a lot of people here in the audience, but we basically have, or I have classified these activities into the 3 different types of levels. At the very top, we have this level 1, where we are collecting the adsorption equilibrium and kinetic data. Without these pieces of information, it's practically impossible to design the process. At the same time, we can also conduct a series of experiments. We can pack columns in the laboratory. We can measure dynamic column breakthrough and obtain some information that could potentially be useful for characterizing the actual physical systems, which is something that is now addressed on the level number 2. So level number 2 is pretty much process systems engineering level, where we use different types of tools, different types of mathematical models. We solve these models, we optimize these models, and from there, we can already have a better understanding of what the features of the material that have been observed in level 1, how this can impact the process performance, and how this become relevant in the design of this type of unit ops. And finally, when available, we can, as it is the case for this project, we can go ahead and construct a pilot plant. We can go ahead and pack some adsorbers, some columns with oxygen binding adsorbents, and then calibrate our detailed models for the cycles. That's one thing that is important to do. And the second one, which I've written to the right, we can reapply process optimization and then fine tune the optimization model as well, so that we can recommend design points and operation conditions. This is what nowadays the community is calling digital twin. So basically we can generate a digital twin. And despite of the fact that I've mentioned very quickly all of these levels, as you probably know, each of these levels requires a significant amount of time. So the design process is, of course, sequential. It communicates also between the levels. So information from between the different levels provides us better ability to collect the data, for example, at the experimental level, but it also allows us to calibrate our models correctly. So let's talk a little bit about the adsorption equilibrium for a particular oxygen binding adsorbent, which we have been taking into consideration for this project. And as you can see, just from looking at the equilibrium, you can already attestate that this will probably have a very high selectivity in terms of binding the oxygen with respect to the nitrogen. We have fitted these to single component adsorption isothermal Toth equation. And then we apply ideal source solution theory, which is one of the simplest ansatz which we can apply in order to determine competitive binary equilibrium from the single component adsorption information. So now with this preliminary model for equilibrium, we can also take a little bit look at the kinetics and then calibrate potentially a model, a detailed mathematical model. We can extract some information regarding the heat transfer. We can look at temperature profiles, confirm oxygen optics, high oxygen optics and selectivity from these dynamic color breakthrough experiments. And like I said, the main goal here is just to make sure that the material will work as expected from what we've seen from the adsorption equilibrium. So as you can see, as we proceed with the design strategy, we refine and we obtain more and more information, which guides us and tells us, gives us an idea of where are the right process operating parameters for this type of process. So now, as I mentioned, for level number 2, we can first start with something called a shortcut method. And there are a plethora of models, shortcut models that you made that have appeared also recently. Just to mention a few, the methods of Mering and Whibley from 2013. We have the BAAM from the University of Alberta group of Ravin Rajendran. And then the one that I'm presenting here, which was developed by Jay Lee's group in KAIST in 2017. This is probably one of the simplest ones that we know of. This is very practically straightforward to implement. It's just a nonlinear algebraic equation that one needs to solve iteratively, and then one can generate this type of plots. And these plots are interesting because they already show us two things. The first one, that we, under relatively mild conditions for an PSA cycle, we could potentially obtain very high purity of the product, higher than 90%, at relatively low energy consumption of between 400 and 600, 800 kilowatt hour per ton oxygen at room temperature. So one of the things that one can also compute using ideal source solution theory and for this material, just from the adsorption equilibrium, we can look at working capacity. And as you can see, for this particular material, the capacity is comparatively small if one thinks in terms of what the zeolites can do for us for the nitrogen binding adsorbent. But nonetheless, the separation selectivity is very high for this material. The purities are high, and the process conditions seem to be relatively mild and suitable for designing a process that can be effective in terms of the economic point of view. And now we can go ahead again on this process systems level. We can go a little bit of details on how we go about with this. We have mathematical models, one-dimensional in time. These are spatially distributed systems. We solve them using a finite volume technique, which is already well documented and accepted in the community. We can incorporate ideal Adsorption solution theory as we have done in the previous computations for consistency. And we already introduced here some details as to the packing of the fixed bed, which is just cylindrical strudets. And of course, these geometries considering the correlations that we use for mass and heat transfer that are applied in this detailed mathematical model. With that, then we have to look a little bit at what we need to assess in terms of the VPSA cycle. So what I'm showing here are 4-step and 6-step configurations that are target obtaining high purity recovery of the extract species, in this case, the oxygen that has binded to our adsorbent. And these cycle configurations, of course, can be applied to a number of separations. And I have also reported in the literature, such as the flue gas separations, this type of heavy recovery, heavy product recovery cycles are also used for alkane, alkene separations, and so forth. So in general, there's a wealth of knowledge that tells us that such cycle configurations can be effective when we are interested in recovering the more adsorbed component that have purity. And in order to understand how these cycles work and propose the design configurations, then we need to understand what the trade-offs are in terms of the metrics that are used for this type of processes. So just to show you an idea of what we can do with a very simple 4-step process already with this type of adsorbent, I'm showing here the results, so that with the information that we obtain from the shortcut method, we can a priori estimate some of the pressure levels that we will require in the actual process. As you can see, this gives about a pressure ratio of around 100, which is still very high, which this suggests that we still need to do a little bit more optimization on the other operating variables or degrees of freedom that these cycles have. But already with this very simple result, we can see that we can obtain purities close to 90% as desired for the project, and with a very high recovery. So this also means that we might be able to get away with sacrificing a little bit of the recovery in the product in order to increase the purity and reach maybe close to 95% purity, which is the actual target for that we expect to obtain for this type of material. And with that said, let me just comment briefly, because it's still work that we are carrying out regarding the optimization strategy for the cycle configurations that I mentioned earlier. We apply a strategy that we also reported earlier this year, which basically consists of treating the solver as a black box, which is the same strategy that we would apply if we were to use other types of stochastic algorithms or genetic algorithms for that matter, which have been used also for this type of separation process. And one thing that we do is that we improve in the computational time that is required for the calculation of the metrics of the process at cyclic steady state. And then on top of that, instead of using a conventional stochastic algorithm, we resort to the surrogate-based optimization tool. And this allows us to reduce to the computational cost to around 1 order of magnitude, as we have reported recently, the references that I'm describing below. And with that said, I'll just go back to jump to the conclusions. So we have measured adsorption equilibria of the species present in air using an oxygen binding adsorbent. And then I presented the information on how we use this information with two very simple mathematical tools with different degree of complexity. So we confirmed that this material is suitable from the experimental data, but also from the preliminary process simulation. And I have outlined here a systematic design strategy, which can be used to assess the potential of this type of materials. Finally, of course, this design strategy is of general character and can be applied in other industrially relevant adsorbent systems of interest. And with that, I'd like to thank you for your attention and just acknowledge the kind support of the Department of Energy of the United States in the frame of the project pilot testing of a modular system for oxygen production. And with that, now let's move on to the questions. Here's my contact information, and you can also find this contact information in the iPoster in case you are interested in the research that we are conducting in this topic. Thank you very much.